Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Ches, Daf 108 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, we're getting close, as I like to point out every day now. Friends, two Mishnayos today. They both kind of talk about Me'un. The first one talks about Me'un, the second one talks about Me'un, but also the second one talks about more complicated stuff. Get, Me'un, nullification of stuff. Let's go weiter. So, Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Bey is at the Mishnah, about 10 lines from the bottom. Who is a minor who would need to refuse, right? Who does this Me'un thing? So, if her mother or brother married her off, right? Of course, Mida Oraisa, her father could marry her off, but if her father is Geshturbin, or I think as we learned the other day, there is a possibility, I think Davka yesterday, whatever it is, I think so, that, whatever, she could be a Yisoma B'chai Avia or something. Anyways, the simpler case is where her father dies and then her brother or mother marries her off, so it's only Kedusha Midar Abonon, Lida'ata, with her consent. So, in that case, she could bounce by just doing Me'un. But if they married her off without her consent, well, she doesn't even need to do Me'un, she could just bizounce. Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, called Tinokas she'ena yichol lishma kidushel, ena tzrich l'mayin. Any kitana who she's so young that she is unable to take responsibility for her kiddushin, meaning, right, like let's say he gave her a ring as kiddushin and she's not responsible enough to be able to not lose the ring. So then that's too young. Meaning she has to at least be able to take responsibility and keep control. What the heck is the word? Guard, not lose. Yeah, she has to be able to not lose her ring and take responsibility for that. If she can't do that, so then she's too young. There are probably some adults who also lose things a lot. What about them? Maybe they can't get married as a katana ever. Rabbi Lazar Omer says, Rabbi Lazar, in Maisa Katana Klum. So Rabbi Lazar says that Take, or I think we'll say the Gos Abach, I think says Rabbi Eliezer, and it's going to make more sense a little bit later on. So friends, Rabbi Eliezer it is. Rabbi Eliezer Omer says, Rabbi Eliezer, in Maisa Katana Klum, that a child can't do anything. Elikimafuta. She's just kind of like a mefuta. It says, though she's seduced, Bas Yisrael Koyin, Losocha B'Tshuma. If she's a Bas Yisrael who's married as a katana to a Koyin, so Losocha B'Tshuma, she's not able to eat Tshuma, right? Usually if a Bas Yisrael is married to a Koyin, she can eat Tshuma. Not if she's a katana. Bas Koyin the Yisrael, Toicha B'Tshuma. If she's a Bas Koyin, and she's married as a katana to a Yisrael, I guess this Dirabonon kind of thing. So then, I assume it means that if she's married Mida Oraisa from her father, I assume that means that she's just considered like any other marriage. But it says Rabbi Eliezer, I guess in this case, if her father's dead, I imagine, so then it's nothing. And if she's a Bas Koyin, she can continue eating Truma even if she's married to a Yisrael. If she's a Bas Yisrael, she cannot eat Truma even if she's married to a Koyin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Kol akovet she minayish ki'ilu hi ishto, kol akovet she'ena minayish ki'ilu ena ishto, and the Gemara is going to explain what this means, but basically if she's staying with, if she's staying with him to be with him, so then she's considered his wife, but if she's staying with him not to be with him, then she's not considered his wife. Friends, we're going to have to see in the Gemara what that means. Okay. Says the Gemara, says Rabbi Yehuda, some take say, it was starting a brisa, but Rishona, initially, Hayukozvin get Me'un. Initially, they would write a document of Me'un, that if this katana bounces from her husband, they would write a document, and they would write, Lo ra'eina bey, I'm not interested in him, V'lo tzaveina bey, I'm not interested in him, V'leison aboya lisnazba bey, I'm not interested in him, I don't want to be married to him. But that was too wordy. There was too much words there. This nazar is too long. Amr, they said, you know what? They're going to confuse it with a get. I'm not exactly sure what the nafkaminas are there. Maybe like in terms of like, the nafkaminas in terms of family members. Can you marry like relatives and things? Okay. Takinu achi. Ploni me'en aplonis bas ploni be'an ponos. They say, you know what? Let's make this more straightforward. On such and such a day, so and so refused so and so. Much more to the point. Friends, what do you think about to the point? I'll tell you what I think about to the point. I'm into it. To the point is good, I think. I think to the point is good. So the rabbis taught, Ezu meun. What's considered meun? Omra, she says, I can't do it enough. I'm done with my husband Ploni. I'm not interested in the betrothal that he betrothed me. Imi va'achi, my mother and my brother. You also can Rabbi Yehuda says, even in this case, even if she's in like, I don't know, like the marriage like thing. Oh gosh, what's a canopy or something? Like there was some like vehicle that she would sit in, and I think like there would like be poles and like people would carry it on their shoulders or something, and they would take her from her father's house to her husband's house or something. And if she says V'amra, and while she's on this like fancy vehicle, she says Yefshi b'floni baili meh. That's what she says. She says meh. I'm not interested in this guy. I say, oh meun. Okay, well that's a refusal. You also okay in Amr Yehuda. Yehuda says afilu hayu orchin mesubin bebeis baila. Even if she was at her husband's house and there were guests, vihi omedes umashka aleim, and she was serving them some kind of drinks. V'amr laim, and she says to the guests, Yefshi b'floni baili. By the way, I'm not interested in my husband. Hareu meun. That's meun. You also okay in Amr Yehuda afilu shigra baila eitzel chenvani lavi lo chayfetz mishelo. If her husband sends her to a store to pick up something for him, and she says to the storekeeper, I'm not interested in my husband. There's no greater refusal than this. And in any of these cases, if she expresses that she's uninterested in being together with her husband, well then that's considered meun, and she can just pounce. And the chiddush over here is that there's no bezdin here, right? Meaning, if she's just going to the store to pick up something and she says to the storekeeper, like, yo, holy brother, I'm out. I'm not interested in my husband. I'm going to bounce. There's no bezdin, no witnesses, no nothing. Just the storekeeper. That's enough to be considered. Any child who's so young and not yet responsible. Oh, maybe that's what I was looking for. Responsible. That's a good word. Responsible. Yeah, that's nice. Any young girl who's not yet responsible enough to be able to care for, I feel like I'm describing this much better now. She's not responsible enough to be able to properly care for her like wedding ring, and she'll lose it. Okay, I feel like that was an okay description. So then she doesn't need to do meun. Amr Rav Yehuda Amr Shmuel halacha k'b'chanina ben Antigonus, that the halacha is like k'b'chanina ben Antigonus. Tana ketana shalom me'ano. What if you have a ketana and she's married? Let's call her Sarah. She's married to Reuven. Okay, fine. Now she never did meun. She never told anybody that she's out. She never went to bezdin. No, nothing. V'amda v'ni says, but then what did she do? Nonetheless, she got married to Shimon. Says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, look, the act of getting married to somebody else, that's basically refusing the original guy, right? She never technically refused Reuven, but she married Shimon. Right? Marrying Shimon is basically saying, Reuven, I'm not interested in you, holy brother. What if she didn't get married to Shimon, but she got betrothed to Shimon? Tashma, Ketana Shlomeana, a Ketana, if Sarah did not refuse Reuven, v'amdav niskadsha, but she got betrothed to Shimon, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Amu Kiddusha Heinen Meunel, that they said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira that getting betrothed to Shimon is basically saying, Reuven, I'm not interested in you. I'm getting betrothed to Shimon. Yibarlu de'asa kasha. Pligi rabbanon ole Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira olo. So first they ask the kasha, do the rabbis argue on Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says if she gets engaged or if she gets married to somebody else, that's basically me'un. Do the rabbis agree or do they disagree? And if you say that the rabbis disagree, b'kiddushin, do they only disagree with regard to kiddushin, to betrothal, and let's say that getting betrothed to Shimon is not refusing Ruvain, but if she gets married to Shimon, that would be considered to be refusing Ruvain, or afilu b'nisuin, or even if she gets married, the rabbis would say the rabbis would say it's not considered me'un. And if you say that they argue both by Kiddushin and by Nisuin, halacha kimoso and halacha kimoso, do we pass like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira or not? And if we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, okay, and if you say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, would the halacha be like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira only by nisuin, only when she mamish gets married to Shimon? So then we say that she's refusing Ruvain. Or would it be that even if she simply gets betrothed to Shimon, then it's as though she's Ruvain. She's refusing Ruvain. Okay, it feels like we just went up and then down, like Kilo built up. Anyways, okay, so we're trying to figure out, did the rabbis argue with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira only by Kiddushin, and maybe not by Nisuin even? And if we said the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, is it by Kiddushin, is it by Nisuin? We're trying to figure this out. Toshma, come in here. Amar Vira Mashmuel says if you're in the name of Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and he says it flat out. He doesn't differentiate whether we're talking about Kiddushin, Nisuin. Simply he says the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and therefore Memele it's referring to both Kiddushin and Nisuin, that if Sarah gets betrothed or married to Shimon, so Memele she's refusing Reuven. Halacha Michlal de Plige. Now if we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, so that implies that it's not like somebody else. I.e. it's not like the Chacham. I.e. the Chacham do argue on Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and nonetheless we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that the rabbis argue on Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira both by Kiddushin and by Nisuin, and nonetheless we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Vakati tibaylach, but still we have another question. We were just talking about if she gets engaged or married to Shimon, but let's talk about Ruvain. Was she engaged to Ruvain when she got betrothed or married to Shimon? Was she married to Ruvain? Was she married to Ruvain? Or maybe she was only betrothed to Ruvain when she got betrothed or married to Shimon. Tashma dechalse de Abdon Imrud, that the daughter-in-laws of Abdon, who was the shamus of Rebbe, who we learned about the other day in that story with Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi. So, and we said over there, after that incident with Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi, that his two daughter-in-laws who were Ketanos, they refused his sons. So the Chazad Abdon Imrud, that the daughters-in-laws of Abdon bounced. Shadar Rebbe Zuge de Rabban al-Mivdakinu, and then Rebbe sent after them a pair of rabbis to check up on them and see if they really did intend to bounce from Abdon's sons. Amre Lehu Nashe, and when the sort of like the women where they were, not necessarily the daughter-in-laws, but the women who were there, noticed that these two rabbis were coming, they said to the daughter-in-laws of Abdon, Chazu Gavraichu Dikaasu, they said to these two Kitanos, oh look, it looks like your husbands are coming. Amre Lehu, and these girls said to the other women, Nihavu Gavraichu Didchu, let them be your husbands, we're not interested in them. Amr Rebbe, Ein L'chameun Gadol Mizeh, and Rebbe says, alright, that sounds like it's definitely meun to me. My lav dahava nesiva, and let's assume that Abdon's sons were married to them, and that would be meun nonetheless. So lo tav mikadsha kiddushin. No, they were only betrothed. And the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, even when she was married to Reuven. So even if Sarah is married to Reuven, and then she gets betrothed or married to Shimon, that is basically saying to Reuven, I'm out, holy brother. Rabbi Eliezer had said that a ketana ein ma'aseh ketana klum. That whatever this ketana who's being married off by her brother or by her mother, whatever she does, it's considered not binding. I mean, it's not super clear to me exactly, honestly, what like this ma'aseh ketana thing is. Like, is it saying that she's marrying herself off? Maybe that's what it means. Maybe it means that she's marrying herself off. That if she marries herself off, so then it's considered irrelevant. But if her brother or her mother marry off, so then that would be kedusha midrabanan. Let's assume that. So where am I? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Chozrani Akol Tzaddik Chacham V'lo Matzasi Adam Sheish V'midosav B'Ketana Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so now it says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel that he can't find anybody who agrees with Rabbi Eliezer. She'asar Rabbi Eliezer Kim Tayeles Imo B'Chotzer, because Rabbi Eliezer basically makes it as though she's like hanging out with him one day. And then she could just one day just bounce, go to the mikveh, and go home and eat truma because she's a bas kohen. All right. Tana Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Eliezer, in ma'aseh ketana klum. So Rabbi Eliezer says that the actions of a ketana are irrelevant. And therefore, if this young girl marries herself off, so then her husband does not merit, cannot get anything that she finds. Not the things that she makes, not annulling her vows. And he does not inherit her. If he's a kohen, he doesn't become tamitor. And basically the point is, she's not considered his wife. But she would need me'un to dissolve their relationship. Rabbi Yeshua almost says, actually, her husband does merit to the things that she finds, and the things that she makes, and annulling her vows, and her husband can inherit her. You can become tamitor if he's a kohen. So the point being that she would be considered like his wife in all respects, just that she can dissolve the relationship by leaving. Amar Rebbe says, Rebbe says, look, I connect more, I understand more the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer than the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer hishva midos b'ktana, Rabbi Yeshua chilek, because Rabbi Eliezer is consistent and Rabbi Yeshua is inconsistent. My chilek, what makes Rabbi Yeshua inconsistent? Ishtoi tibai get. Well, if she's considered his wife, then she should require a get, right? Meaning, according to Rabbi Yeshua, this ketana is considered like his wife. She can eat truma, he can become tomitor, it could be, made for the nadarim, things like that. So, according to Rabbi Yeshua, if their mom is so married, so then why is me'un enough? They should need a get. So therefore, it's inconsistent. Rabbi Eliezer nami ilav ishtoi me'un nami lo tibai. But one second, is Rabbi Eliezer really that much better? According to Rabbi Eliezer, he's saying that she's not considered like his wife, right? What do we say? He doesn't get the stuff that she finds, that she makes, annulling her vows, right? They can't become tamitor, all that stuff. So then she shouldn't even need to do me'un. But what? Well, she just leaves without doing anything? No, so she'll still at least need me'un. But other than that, I mean, it's entirely consistent. Okay, fine. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov had said some interesting statement. Let's go back to the Mishnah for a second. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov if this girl is staying with her husband on account of him, so then we treat her as his wife. If she's not with him on account of him, then we don't treat her like his wife. So what does that mean? What does it mean that she's staying with him on account of him? And what's considered to be staying with him but not on account of him? Well, let's say they come and they say to her, why don't, Shimon comes and says, hey, why don't you marry me? She says, no, I'm not marrying you. I'm married to Reuven. Zo Yaakov Shimon Aish. So clearly she's staying with Reuven on account of that she wants to be with Reuven. And therefore, she's considered like his wife and, Mefrinedarim, Tameh, all that stuff. Machmas b'nei Adam she'enim mu'uganli. But if Shimon comes and says, come marry me, and she says, no, like, I'm not interested in you, well then, Zo Yaakov she'enim Aish. Well, the reason why she's staying with Reuven is not necessarily because she's into Reuven, but because she's not interested in Shimon. And in that case, she would not be considered like his wife. He wouldn't become Talmidor if he's a Kohen, etc. Abai bar Oven, Reb Chanina bar Oven, da Amri Tarvayu, both Abai bar Oven and Reb Chanina bar Oven say, Nosan lo get, if Reuven gave Sarah a get, Zo Yaakov Shimon Aish. So then she was up until then staying with Reuven on account of Reuven, right? Meaning, if he's the one who broke off the marriage, right? He gave her the get. She was interested in staying with him, but he gave her a get. So then that's considered, right? She was with him on his account. She wanted to be with him. And therefore they would be considered like they were married and all the implications of that in terms of becoming Talmidor and inheriting her, etc. And therefore he would, not be able to marry any of her relatives. She would not be able to marry any of his relatives. When she gets divorced, she would be unable to marry a Kohen. But if she refused him, well then she's indicating that she's not interested in being with this fellow, and therefore it just simply annuls the marriage, and he is permitted to marry her relatives. She's permitted to marry his relatives, and she could still marry a Kohen. But one second, why would we need Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to teach us this in this Mishnah? Isn't that basically, right, meaning for saying that he gives her a get, so then he's also to her relatives, she's also to his relatives, she can't marry a Kohen. But if she does Me'un, so then they're permitted to each other's relatives, and she can marry a Kohen. That's already, we have another Mishnah that says, right? I think it's a Mishnah it's a Mishnah we're about to learn in a second. Where am I? I lost it. But we're about to learn in the next Mishnah that if she does Me'un, is permitted to her relatives. She's permitted to his relatives. She could still marry a Kohen. But if he gives her a bill of divorce, then he cannot marry her relatives. She cannot marry his relatives. She cannot marry a Kohen. So why would I have to say it twice? Perushay kamefarish. So the Gemara says, well, the next Mishnah is really just explaining what we just said. That meaning, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, "Kol hakav min ha'ish, kilu ishto, kol hakav min ha'ish, kilu ena ishto." What does that mean? So it means ham enes ba'ish humut b'krovoseh, etc. So it's just the next Mishnah is explaining the previous Mishnah. Okay, fine, and that is the opinion of Abai bar Oven and Reb Chanina bar Oven. All right, friends, and now we get to a new Mishnah. I think it's a relatively interesting Mishnah. So it says in Mishnah, "Enes ba'ish humut b'krovoseh." So if she does Me'un, so it basically annuls the marriage, and he could marry her relatives. She can marry his relatives. She can marry a Kohen. But if he gives her a bill of divorce, then he's not allowed to marry her relatives. She's not allowed to marry his relatives. She cannot marry a Kohen. Fine. Now, pay attention, friends. Nasan lo get. If Reuven gives Sarah, and of course Sarah is a Ketana that's married to Midrabanim. So if Reuven gives her a get, ve'achzir, but then they got back together. Me'anabo, but then she bounced. V'nises la'acher, and then she marries Shimon. V'nisar malon is Garsha, and then Shimon dies or they get divorced. Mutar is la'achzor lo. She's allowed to go back to Reuven. Let's go on. Me'anabo, if she had first refused Reuven, ve'achzira, but then they got back together, nasan laget, then he gave her a divorce, v'nises la'acher, then she marries Shimon, v'nisar malon is Garsha, and then she becomes widowed or divorced, asura la'achzor lo, she cannot go back to Reuven. Let's go weiter for a second. Ze'aklal, here is the rule, get acher me'un, that if first she did me'un, and then he gave her, and then they got back together, then he gave her a get, and then she married Shimon, so asur la'achzor lo, she won't be able to go back to Reuven. But Me'un achar get. But if he first gave her a get, and then they got back together, and then she refused him and went to Shimon, and then Shimon dies or they get divorced, mutar lachzor lo, she would be able to come back to Reuven. Now, hamima'enes bo'ish, okay, if Sarah refuses Reuven and bounces, v'nises la'achar v'gersha, and then she marries Shimon, and they get divorced. La'achar me'eno, then she marries Levi, and she refuses Levi. La'achar v'gersha, and then she marries Yehuda and divorces Yehuda. Ze'aklal, this is the rule. Kol sheyotze menu beget, whoever she leaves with a get, asur lachzor lo, she cannot go back to him. Okay, b'me'un mutar lachzor lo, but if it's with me'un, then she can go back to him. So, right, she left Reuven with me'un, then she married Shimon, and they got divorced. Then she married Levi, and then she refuses Levi. She cannot go back to Shimon because she got divorced from Shimon. But when she then goes to Yehuda and they get divorced, she can go back to Levi because that was only me'un. Now, frekti Gemara, Alma, Asi me'un, u'mavatul get. Now, if we look at the Reisha of the Mishnah, what do we say in the Reisha of the Mishnah, friends? You got a hald cup. What do we say in the Reisha of the Mishnah? In the Reisha of the Mishnah, we said that if he gives a get, he divorces her, then they get back together. Then she refuses him. And then she marries Shimon. And then they get divorced or Shimon dies. She's allowed to go back to Reuven. So what happened? Reuven gave her a get. They got back together. And then she refused him. She's allowed to go back to him after Shimon. So we see that her me'un was mevatel the get. Now friends, what did we say in the seif of the Mishnah? We said in the seif of the Mishnah, what's the very last thing we said? Ze'aklal, this is the rule, kol sheyotze menu beget, asur lachzor lo, b'me'un mutar lachzor lo. That whoever she was separated from by a get, she cannot go back to. Meaning, right, she was married to Reuven, she refused Reuven. She then got married to Shimon, they got divorced with a get. She then marries Levi, she refuses Levi, we said, right, Ze'aklal, kol sheyotze menu beget, asur lachzor lo, she cannot go back to Shimon, who she got a get from. So the me'un of Levi was not mevatel the get of Shimon. So whereas in the Reisha, we're saying that Reuven first gave a get, and then they got back together, and then she refused him, we say that her me'un is mevatel the get. And yet in the Sefer we're saying that if Shimon gives a get, and then she refuses Levi, the me'un is not mevatel the get of Shimon. So in the Reisha we're saying that me'un is mevatel the get. In the Sefer we're saying me'un is not mevatel the get. Friends, what are we supposed to do? So let's read that again. If we look at the Reisha, so it sounds like me'un is being mevatel the get. Viramini, but we have a contradiction from the Sefer. That if she refuses Reuven, v'nises la'achar v'gersha, and then she marries Shimon and they get divorced, la'achar u'me'on, and then she marries Levi and she refuses Levi, le'achar v'gersha, and then she gets married to Yehuda and they get divorced. Ze'aklal kol sheyotze sa'imenu beget asur lachzor lo. That whoever they got separated with a get, so for example Shimon, they got separated with a get, she cannot go back to Shimon, even after the me'un of Levi. B'me'un muteres lachzor lo. But if they got separated with me'un, she can go back. So when she does me'un with Levi and then marries Yehuda and they get divorced, she can go back to Levi. Alma lo asi me'un dechavi uvatel gita didei. So we see that the me'un of the other person is not mevatel his get, meaning Shimon gave a get to Sarah. When she then marries Levi and she refuses Levi, the me'un from Levi will not be mevatel the get of Shimon. Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Tavra, Mishashanazo lo shanazo. So Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel, it's Taka Akasha. We have contradicting Reisha and Seifa. So it must be that there are two different Tanoim. That there's one Tana in the Reisha of the Mishnah who says that me'un is mevatel get, and then there's a different Tana in the Sefer of the Mishnah who says that me'un is not mevatel get. Amar Rave, umay kusha. Rave says, wait a second, you don't have to say it's two different Tanoim. You could say it's all the same Tana. V'dilma me'un didei mevatel get didei. Maybe you could argue that, well, there's a difference, of course, between the Reisha and the Sefer, technically, which is the Reisha, the me'un, the get and the me'un was with Reuven, right? Reuven was married to Sarah. Reuven divorced Sarah with a get. They then got back together. Sarah then bounced from Ruvain with Meun. So both of them were with Ruvain. And we say in that case, the Meun is mevatel the get. Meun de Chavri lo mevatel gita didei. But in the Seifa, when Shimon gives Sarah a get and then she refuses Levi, they're two different people, right? The get was with Shimon. The Meun was with Levi. The Meun from Levi is not going to be mevatel the get of Shimon. Umashna Meun de Chavri de lo mevatel gita didei. But one second. But 1 second. How come what? How come when it's two different people, when it's Shimon and Levi, do we say that the Meun from Levi will not be mevatel the get of Shimon? Right, again, Umashna Meun de Chavre, how come the Meun from Levi to lo mevatel gita dite is not mevatel the get from Shimon? Adi de makeres bir mizosov v'kritzosov, because since Sarah recognizes the gestures and lip movements of Shimon, also Meshabesh Umaisi Lo, he will go and interfere with her marriage to Levi. Meaning, when Shimon divorces Sarah, she may have been interested in remaining with Shimon. Shimon gave her a get and said, "You're on your own." Now, she then went and married Levi. Now, if we say that if she refuses Levi, she can go, it'll be mevatel the get from Shimon and she can go back to Shimon. Right? It won't be a situation of Mazal Grushaso. Right? Of course, we know that if you get divorced and then you marry somebody else, you cannot go back to your original husband. But if we say that if Shimon divorces Sarah and then she goes and gets married to Levi, and then she refuses Levi, and if we say that the Meun from Levi will annul the get from Shimon, well then Shimon knows that Sarah may have been interested in remaining with him, but he divorced her by giving her a get. Maybe he's going to interfere in her marriage with Levi, knowing that Sarah may want to remain with him, with Shimon, and he'll interfere with the marriage with Levi and make his gestures and lip movements, and I'm sure that they were irresistible gestures and lip movements, and she will come back to him. And because we don't want there to be any foul play and any interference from Shimon in Sarah's marriage with Levi, so we say that in that case, that when Shimon divorces Sarah and she marries Levi, and then she refuses Levi, she cannot go back to Shimon. But Meun dide nami, but why don't we say the same thing when he divorces Sarah and then they get back together, and then Sarah refuses him, and then she marries Levi, and then she marries Shimon? We say that she would be able to go back to Ruvain, but shouldn't we be concerned about the same thing? That he's going to be doing his irresistible gestures and lip movements when she's married to Shimon? Lolibatel gita dide, let's say that the Meun that she does to Ruvain should not be mevatel Ruvain's get. Because since Sarah recognizes Ruvain's irresistible gestures and lip movements, also Meshabesh Umaisila, Ruvain is going to interfere with Sarah's marriage to Shimon. Hakvar shibsha v'lo ishabsha. To which the Gemara says, well, no, that isn't really a concern, because in the case where Ruvain divorced Sarah, and then they got back together, and then Sarah bounced from Ruvain, what, do you think Ruvain was just like, all right, see you later? No, he probably tried to do his irresistible gestures and lip movements, and he's like, look, don't you see my gestures and my lip movements? Aren't they irresistible? How can you fathom going to Shimon? He can't do these gestures and lip movements. And then she says, actually, they're not so irresistible. I'm going to Shimon. I don't care about your gestures and lip movements. And therefore, we see that she was able to resist his gestures and lip movements when she refused him and then went to Shimon. So we're not concerned about foul play in their marriage, right? So, when Shimon, in the Seifa, when Shimon divorces Sarah and then she goes and marries Levi, we're concerned that if she leaves from Levi and is able to go back to Shimon, Shimon's going to interfere with her marriage with Levi to try and get her back. But in the Reisha of the Mishnah, when Ruvain was married to Sarah, and then they got divorced, and then they get back together, and then Sarah refuses him, and of course, when she refused him, he tried doing all of his gestures and lip movements, and it didn't work. so we're not concerned that he's going to interfere with her marriage to Shimon, and therefore, if their marriage ends in, if Sarah and Shimon's marriage ends in divorce, or Shimon dies, so she would be able to go back to Reuven because we're not concerned about foul play. So therefore, I can understand why in the Reisha Me'un is mevatel the get, and why in the Seifa Me'un is not mevatel the get. Eli kasha dechavre ad dechavre kasha. But rather, the real question is the following: is based on different characters. What does that mean? Dechavre kasha. Me'an abo vechzira noson lo get. In the ratio of the Mishnah, it said what? It said Me'anabo ve'achzira, right? If Reuven and Sarah were married, Sarah says, Reuven, I'm out of here. Noson lo get, ve'achzira, but then they got back together. Noson lo get, and then Reuven divorced Sarah, v'niseis le'acher, and then she marries Shimon, v'nis armela, unis garsha, and then she gets widowed or divorced. Asura lachzor lo. She's not allowed to go back to Reuven. Right? It was a situation where she refused Reuven. They got back together. Reuven then divorced her. She then married Shimon. If Shimon dies or they get divorced, she cannot go back to Reuven. Time dinasayim lo nizgasha. But that's specifically because she became, right, because Shimon died or because they got divorced. Ha me'ano. What if Sarah refused Shimon? Muteres lachzor lo. Sounds like she would be able to go back to Reuven. So we see that when she refuses Shimon, the me'un from Shimon will be mevatel to get from Reuven. So we see me'un of me'un of Shimon is mevatel to get of Reuven, viraminu, and yet we say in the Sefer that if Sarah is married to Reuven and she refuses Reuven, v'niseis la'achar, and then she marries Shimon, v'gersha, and then Shimon divorces her, gives her a get, la'achar me'anabo, and then she marries Levi and refuses Levi, ze'aklal kol shiyatzusam mimenu beget, asur la'achzor bo. And we said in the Sefer that Shimon, who divorced Sarah with a get, Sarah cannot go back to Shimon when she refuses Levi. The Me'un muteres lachzor lo. But if she leaves with Me'un, then she would be able to go back to him. Right? So if she then marries Yehuda and they get divorced, she'd be able to go back to Levi. So we see from the Sefer that the Me'un of Levi is not mevatel the get of Shimon. So whereas in the Reisha, we seem to be saying that the Me'un of Shimon would be mevatel the get of Reuven, and yet we're saying in the Sefer that the Me'un from Levi is not mevatel the get of Shimon. So Belazar says, okay, so then clearly whoever taught the Reisha is a different Tana than he who taught the Sefer. Ula Amr says, Ula kigon sheshilsha begitin demechzia kigdola. So Ula says, look, in the Sefer where we do not, when she refuses Levi, she's not allowed to go back to Shimon. That's because she had gotten divorced already 3 times. Because she got divorced 3 times already as a katana, it's like, Ki'ilu, in order to be able to have so much drama in your life, you must, we basically, what do we say? The mechzia kegedola. She basically seems like a gedola. She already got married and divorced and married to other people in between a whole bunch of times. It basically seems like she's a gedola, and that's why, it's basically a case of machzir grushaso, and she would be unable to go back to the fellow who she got divorced from. All right. Montana, when we say that that there was like a different that the Tana in the Reisha is different than the Tana in the Seifa. So who's the Tana of the Seifa who says that she would not be allowed to go back to the one who she got divorced from? So Amar Vira Amar Rab says Vira in the name of Rab. My dichsev, what does the pasuk mean? Was it in Mishlei? In Eicha. Right. Mimenu ba'kesev shosinu, that we drank our water with money. Eitzenu b'mchir yavau, and our wood we had to pay for. B'shas hasakonin is baksha alocha zo, that during a dangerous time with the Romans when they made a gezerah not to learn Torah, So this question was asked, beget, that if she left the first husband with a get, and the second husband with meun, would she be able to go back to the first husband, i.e., is the meun mevatel the get? And they hired somebody for 400 zuz, and he went to Rabbi Akiva, and he visited him in jail, and he asked him, V'asr. And Rabbi Akiva says, it's not allowed. It's Rabbi ben Beseira ben Nitzivin, V'asr. They asked Rabbi ben Beseira in where he lived in Nitzivin, and he also said that it's asr. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi says, Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi, Lozo lo utzrachnu. He says, they didn't need to hire somebody for 400 zuz to ask Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi ben Beseira this question, because after all, the Isser Karis Hitarta, if you're going to say that she can write meun, she could just refuse the fellow. And then there's no longer Eishes Ish, which is an Isser Erva, Isser Karis, this Lavlo Kol Shekain. Certainly then she'd be able to go back to an Isser Lav, right? Meaning Machzik Rishasol is just an Isser Lav. So therefore, we see here that there's this machlokes, right? Meaning over here we're saying that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi ben Beseira are saying that by meun would not be mevatel get, and she wouldn't be able to go back, right? Which is like the seifa. And Rabbi Yishmael bar Yossi is explaining like the ratio where if she does meun, she would be able to go back to the original, that it would be mevatel get, because Rabbi Yishmael bar Yossi is saying that, if meun is able to be mevatel eishes ish, certainly it's able to be mevatel the lav of machzik rushasa. Okay? Bram Kachshalu. This is what they asked Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi ben Beseira. Harisha Oisa Eishes Achi Imo, that if this Ketana was the wife of the brother of his mother, okay, Shishnielo. Now your mother's brother's wife is a Shnias Larayis. Vinasa Achiv, and then he dies, your mother's brother dies, and then she then goes and marries your brother. Right, Me'aviv, right, from his father, Vames, and then the brother from the father dies. So now you have a situation where on the one hand he's got to do Yibum, because his brother's wife died, but on the other hand she's a Shnias Larayis. So can she do Meun now, and basically undo retroactively the marriage to his mother's brother, right, when she was his mother's brother's wife, and then then she would no longer be a shnia slarayis, and they'd be able to do yibum. Yesh meun la'achar misa b'makom mitzvah olo. Is there meun after death in a place of when there's a mitzvah or not? Sachu shnei bnei adam ba'arba me'uzuz. So they hired 2 people for 400 zuz. Uvav v'shalu es Rabbi Akiva b'veis asur, and they asked Rabbi Akiva in prison v'asur, and he says it's asur. Es Rabbi ben Beseira ben Nitzivin v'asur. They asked Rabbi ben Beseira ben Nitzivin, and he also said that it's asur. Amar Yitzchak bar Asiyon umod Rav. Says Rabbi Yitzchak bar Asiyon that Rav admits shemuteres le'achiv shel zeh shene esra alav. Okay, so it says Rabbi Yitzchak bar Asiyon that in the event, right, we said that if she was married to Reuven, she refused Reuven, then she gets married to Shimon, and they get divorced with a get, then she marries Levi, so we say, and then she refuses Levi, she's not allowed to go back to Shimon. Says Rav Yitzchak bar Asiyon, that Rav admits that she would be permitted to get married to Shimon's brother. Shenesra Olav, right, meaning, I don't know what I just said, but if she does meun with Levi, she'd be allowed to she's usher. She's not allowed to get back with Shimon, but she would be able to get back with Shimon's brother. She would be able to marry Shimon's brother. Pshita is in the obvious. Who knew the makeres b'mizosa v'kritosa? The only reason why we said that she would not be allowed to remarry Shimon is because of his irresistible gestures and lip movements. Aval achiv lo, but she's not familiar with Shimon's brother's gestures and lip movements. Ma'odetema may have thought ligzer haya to I kamashman, but nonetheless it may have thought to say what we should make exer for Shimon's brother on account of Shimon, and we don't say that. Okay. Bikidam did also say Amar Yitzchak bar Asiyon kishem she'asur lo kach asur la'achin, that just like Sarah would be unable to go back to Shimon, she's also unable to go back to his brothers. but she doesn't recognize their gestures and lip movements. So yeah, but we nonetheless make a gzera by Shimon's brothers on account of Shimon himself. Well, friends, that was the Kuf Ches of Masechta Yevamos. Today we learned two dafs. The first two mishnahs. The first mishnah had a bunch of assorted halachas about me'un, right? That me'un is when her brother or her mother marries her off, and asadaf could be with her consent. If it's not with her consent, then she doesn't even need me'un. We saw the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that if a katana marries herself off, so then it's basically irrelevant. And then we saw the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who basically says that, which then leads into the next Mishnah, which is that if her husband divorces her, so then it's considered like they're married to the extent that he's forbidden to her relatives, she's forbidden to his relatives, and she can't marry a kohen. But if they do me'un, so then they're permitted to each other's relatives, and she can marry a kohen. Then we got to this interesting situation about get versus me'un, right? So we said that if it's the same person, right, if Reuven gives her a get and then they get back together, then she does me'un, and then she marries some other person, and then they get divorced or he dies, so she would be able to go back to Reuven. But then we saw something else that's interesting, which is that, but if Reuven divorced Sarah, and then she marries somebody else, so there's a machlokas about if she then refuses that other person, does it nullify Reuven's get? One opinion is yes, it does nullify the get, as we saw by Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, that if me'un works to undo Eishes Ish, certainly it works to undo the lav of Machzik Ushasu Mishanises, whereas the other opinion is that no, because since he divorced her, so then she may be interested in getting back with him, and then he may interfere with the other marriage. So therefore, we say that no, if he divorces her, she would not simply be able to refuse the next guy and go back to him, because he might then interfere in their marriage. Friends, that was the Kuf Ches of Masechta Yevamos. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.